Hello, everybody. I'm good. How are you guys doing tonight? Thank you for being with us tonight. You are at the Art of Hip Hop. For those of you that have never been here before, welcome and thank you for joining us. Give a round of applause, please, to Mr. Justin Bua. Justin's our honored guest, a visitor from across the country who's come to Miami to take in the heat and the art and the art of hip hop, which you're a very big part of already.
Thank you.
So, how many people know Justin Bua's work? How could you not know his work, right? I love that. So everybody knows Justin Bua's work. So how many of you know about Justin Bua? Maybe a couple of people. Okay. Well, we're going to learn, for those of you that don't know his story and that aren't intimate with his work, we're going to have a conversation today about your work, your life, the things that you do. And I think it'll be a bit of an art and hip hop conversation.
Love it.
So, first of all, I also want to thank everybody who's come, that's made a donation at the door or online to the Art of Hip Hop. It helps us continue to operate this place. We are a self-funded entity that does this because we love hip hop and we think people should know about this amazing culture and movement that has been thriving and existing and morphing for the past 50 years. And so for me, I've been a big part of it, just like Justin's been a big part of it, and it's contributed a lot to our lives. And so this place is sort of to honor that and to sort of share that information and that love with others. So thank you so much. So, Justin.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your journey, and I think, in spending some time and speaking to you, I know that you're from New York City, and that you came of age in the 70s and the early 80s. How did, New York City impact your art? Like, what was it like growing up, leading up to becoming an artist?
Exactly like that. So, first of all, thank you, Alan. Thanks, everybody that got me here. Alex, especially Lex right there. He's the liaison. He made it happen. And Doze, because if anybody doesn't know Doze Green, you should know Doze Green because he's one of the most influential graffiti / artists right there. And it's because of, when I have conversations with Doze, I trip out because I think he's like the only one who's been through what I've been through and, 4 years before me. And so I have my version of that, but it's just amazing. And he introduced me to you, and so did Alex. So that's huge right there. But growing up in New York City, it was rife with craziness. I was a latchkey kid, single working mom. My dad left, I was telling you earlier, when I was 2 days old to get milk. He never came back. But meanwhile, I saw him all the time because he was a soap opera star. He was one of the big soap opera actors in the world. He had the #1 song in Puerto Rico. He was huge as a celebrity, and he wound up leaving, living at the Ansonia Hotel. We didn't know where he was. My mom hired a private investigator, realized he was 20 blocks away. So that was the personal story, right? Because what's the cultural affectation versus what's the personal side, right? Because my work is a real amalgamation of personal, spiritual, and my surroundings, my environment. So because my mom was a hardworking mom and I was a latchkey kid, I spent a lot of time hanging out on the streets. I had really no supervision. I had no father. I had no male role model. I had 2 welfare hotels on my block, 200 in the neighborhood, as if New York City wasn't crazy enough. So we were able to just really navigate the streets and be crazy, be wild. And so that was my surroundings. Then I got back home and had a little bit of supervision and went to bed and started my chaotic life again. And I saw this world effloresce in front of me.
So in 1980, you're about 12 years old.
Yep, exactly, 12.
Living in Manhattan, in on the Upper West Side. And by 1980, hip hop is in full bloom. It's everywhere. Rap music is starting to get out on the radio a bit. Kids are on the street. Graffiti is everywhere in your neighborhood. How did you react to that? Well, how did it capture you?
Well, the contextualization is that my mom was an artist. So I would go with my mom on her days where she wasn't a typesetter, and she would hawk her stuff in front of the Metropolitan Museum. So I would sit there and watch her hustle. And my grandfather was actually a very famous letterer. He did Prince Valiant, he did Bazooka Joe, he did Felix the Cat, he was one of Frankie Frazetta's best friends, the Fox. Frankie Frazetta, who, if you don't know Frankie Frazetta, you should know Frankie Frazetta. He's a really wonderful figurative comic book artist and oil painter, great artist. So I grew up kind of surrounded by that, and at the same time, I would walk a block away and I would see Doze's work. I would see Revolt, I would see Futura, Dondi, Zephyr, Hey, these were the people in my neighborhood. And I was just absolutely fascinated by that work. And at the same time, I had friends who were graffiti writers, and I was an early graffiti writer. I used to write just one. I wasn't very good. Everyone's like, oh, you must have been so good because you can paint. And I was like, not really. I was okay. I had great caricature, and my favorite caricature graffiti writer was Doze. So like the Muggsy, the Ken Swift, I would do that, and Vaughn Baudet and all those characters. But I also had a real exposure to the Flemish painters, like Rembrandt, Van Eyck, Vermeer, but mostly the people artists, like Rembrandt and Van Gogh. And those artists were on my walls. I had a lot of dark, more, art on my walls, right? It's like not everybody grows up with Night Watch by Rembrandt or, Van Eyck or, some of these really dark Flemish painters. And that's because my grandfather came from Holland and he came from Amsterdam. And he was a big Flemish artist himself and letterer. And so I had classicalism everywhere. And of course we had the Met, we had the Natural History Museum, so we were able to walk into museums. I was exposed to Monet and Katie Kollwitz and Titian and Raphael and de Kooning at a very early age because my mom was an artist, my grandfather was an artist, and then I was exposed to these street masters like Revolt and Futura and Doze as well. So I had an infusion of both worlds.
When did you start your personal journey painting?
It's funny when, Rob, I don't know where Rob is. He's the cowboy right there. He's my assistant. I moved him from LA to live in the middle of nowhere, so he's great. Round of applause for Rob. Okay, that's enough. No, I'm kidding. That was a lot. That was extra. So, what was the question?
So you're surrounded by these two worlds, Flemish painters, classical painters.
Yes.
When did you pick up the pen and start to draw?
So we're archiving all of my work, and we're finding all these things I've never found before. And one of them are these books I put together when I was 5 years old. And the 5-year-old drawings, Rob was like, dude, those 5-year-old drawings are the same drawings you're doing today that are in my book. Like, they're the same wild, crazy characters. Because when I was 5 years old, I was like the kid in Almost Famous, the journalist documentarian, directed and written by Cameron Crowe, who documents this rock and roll world. And I was documenting this crazy, fucking radical world of people who were being dumped onto the streets because Willow Creek and Creedmoor shut down, and people were dumping, and the government was dumping the mentally insane onto my block in our neighborhood. right? So they were moving next door, and I was sitting there playing dodgeball, handball, stickball, ring-a-lario, whatever it was, and I was sketching this world in front of me. I was looking at the handball court that Bill Blass did, taking the train and seeing all these early, tags. But then, I was, like I said, exposed to a tremendous amount of really, really masterful oil painters. So I think it started when I was like 4 or 5. I started just like everything. I got guys with guns. I got all these crazy, wild, imaginative characters and buildings that is like this architectural melting pot of Goethe and Gaudi and the Nye brothers, these really wild skyscrapers with derelict characters just getting high in front of them. And I'm a little kid, right? I mean, like, this is no exaggeration. You can see the DNA tracking to my contemporary work.
And what was the training path that you took? Did you end up going to school and sort of starting to hone your skills? Because I guess in New York City, back then there were some pretty famous schools that were for these gifted artists like yourself.
Well, like if you didn't get into Stuyvesant, Brooklyn Tech, art and design, music and art, you're fucked. You know what I mean? You're like at Martin Luther King High School. You know what I mean? That's where like you're just not in a good system with kids that care about anything. Like not all the time, but so I was lucky enough to get into the High School of Music and Performing Arts, which was FAME. I had like Desmond Richardson, who was the principal dancer of Alvin Ailey.
Has anybody heard of FAME? We're kind of dating ourselves. Okay.
Yeah, FAME.
All right.
Do you want me to sing
the 70-years in the house? Just kidding.
Well, it was an artistic high school. So if you didn't get into an artistic high school, you were in trouble. And I realized later on that I was kind of at the bottom of the barrel to getting into that high school because the chairman told me. They're like, I remember you were in the lowest percentage. We almost didn't let you in. So had I not been let in, I don't know what would have happened.
And so what was that environment like? Did it do what it was supposed to do? I guess so.
No, because, I think a lot of kids, I was not I always knew the importance of drawing, of draftsmanship, figure drawing, figure painting, but I wasn't as good as a lot of my friends. But in my world, I was the best. But when I went to music and art, I realized there were so many kids who were just better, naturally more gifted. I had to work harder to get to a certain level, to draw really well. To articulate my ideas eloquently required a tremendous amount of proficiency in academia. But these kids had already been going to Art Students League and all these other drawing programs. And so they were just better than I was, to be honest. I was kind of I was creative, I was really creative, but I couldn't get my ideas to sit because I didn't have the skill set. I knew that was so important. So yeah, I was a little bit, even though it was like a local thing, it was a little bit of a fish out of water. And also because I was, as much as I was painting and drawing, I was b-boying and popping, more than that. And I was touring dancing. So I was already like, my entire 1984 was spent touring the world breakdancing with the New York Express and dancing all over Italy. And so when I came back, I always got left back. So I had to go to Boys and Girls High School to go to summer school to get back up, And then, by the way, in Boys and Girls High School, I was like Einstein, so just to let you know.
Well, I understand that.
Yeah.
So that's a school in Bed-Stuy, very far from where you live, and it's a
Right.
really rough school.
Yes. And they were just like, yo, Einstein, you don't give me the answer, I'm gonna fuck you up, man. And I was like, I got you, bro, Jesus.
So you just mentioned a lot of things. Number one, that you were a dancer.
Yes.
And that you were touring the world.
Yes.
So how did you discover dance, or what pushed you in that direction from art to dance?
I lived by Rocksteady Park. I saw guys like Doze, specifically Ken Swift, Mr. Freeze, Frosty Freeze, Crazy Legs. I used to sit there and watch these kids dance. So they were the major leagues. They were the A level. You know, we were the D league dancers. So I was dancing with Ty Fly and Nelson and the Ty, you know, the Rock Boys. And so I was in the crew, but I was in the Rock Boy crew. And in fact, you know, I don't know if I ever told you, Doze, but the first time I remember watching Legs, I was like, yo, I think I could get down and rock steady. I'm young, but Normski's at Rocksteady, and I'm friends with Normski. I'm definitely gonna get down. Normski's the little kid in Flashdance who does the puppet. So I'm like, Legs is looking at me, I'm looking at him, he's looking at me, I'm looking at him, he starts to walk over to me. I was like, this is my moment, this is the opportunity of a lifetime. And Crazy Legs looks at me in the eyes and goes, what the fuck are you looking at? And I was like, what? He was like, what are you looking at? I was like, nothing, I was just looking. That's crazy, what? You know, what? You say what twice, you're trying to punk out. That's a true story, and they were just so good. They were the A team, you know, they were the best of the best, especially Ken Swift, who Doze introduced breaking to, which I can't believe I found that out. That blew my mind. But like, I was like, this is what I want to do. I got picked up as an alternate by a lady named Julie Arenal. She was the choreographer for Hair on Broadway. She formed this breakdance crew that went all over, and we opened for Rudolf Nureyev, James Brown, all over Europe. We did the Spoleto Festival in South Carolina. We did the Spoleto Festival in Italy. I danced in every fucking club in the world, including this very famous club in Viareggio called Bussola Domani. I danced all over. You know, it wasn't just dancing on the street. But I started getting paid, and I was like, I'm gonna be a professional dancer. This is what I'm gonna do.
At 16 years old.
At 14 years old.
14 years old.
Yeah, so I was missing a lot of school. I was writing graffiti, but you know, I wasn't like as good as a lot of my friends, and I was dancing, and I was thinking like, this is it. This is what I'm gonna do. But before that, I was a professional ping pong player. That's a true story. Do you remember Marty Reisman's on 96th Street? That was my spot. I was trained by a guy named Dick Miles, who was the only American to win the Olympics against the Chinese, because it was a Chinese-dominated sport. He saw me. Marty Reisman's was this hustler on 96th Street. He used to be like, I bet you $10 I could beat you with my hat. And you'd be like, what? Okay, let's do it. And he would beat you with his hat. He would take his shoe off and beat you with his shoe. He was a hustler, so all the Cubans and Puerto Ricans would hustle money in there, and I was a kid because I was unsupervised, and I would just go down there with a sketch pad and draw, and they were like, yeah, just, you know, hit the ball. So I started hitting the ball. I became really good. I started to get into really serious matches. People were betting on me. Dick Miles discovered me. I wound up training with Dick Miles. I wound up playing all over New Jersey. I was part of the United Table Tennis Association. I was ranked number 2 for my age.
Crazy.
That was like a really. I used to play at the firehouse in Chinatown against, you know, all the high level Chinese kids, and I would smoke them because I had a different kind of defensive style. And then I quit that. I quit everything. I quit dancing. I quit ping pong. I quit anything that I was getting really good at because I couldn't get to greatness. And so I just quit.
And so, painting.
Painting's the only thing that I stuck with.
So you made the switch post-touring, post-ping pong, post-dance. You're back in New York City, and you decide to finish up school and take painting as a serious profession.
That's right.
How was that process, those early days for you, and how did you get in?
So I was flunking out of music and art. We merged with LaGuardia High School second year down on Lincoln Center. And I was flunking. So every year I'd go to summer school, I'd come back, and it was because I was dancing, and I knew I was smart. But I don't think anyone else knew that. You know what I mean? I was like, I know I'm smart, and I gotta prove that I'm smart. And so the last year, at the honor roll, I was like always like the bottom 20%, 20% to 5%. It was like really embarrassing, to see, because they would rank you. And you would see like out of I had 567 kids graduate in my class, and I was like academically like 542, you know what I mean? So the last year I was like ranked number 3. So I was like, okay, I want to take academia serious. And so I did. And I just busted my ass. And then I was so artistically driven. My mom said, my mom was an academic. She went to NYU. She was a professor of English. And she was an intellectual kind of snob. And she didn't think that she wanted me to have a much more well-rounded education. So I got to school, and I got a scholarship up in Massachusetts. So I went there for English for 3 years, and I was a writing major.
It's kind of unexpected.
Yeah, that was a left fielder.
So you're an English major, but then I'm guessing you switched 2 years into it.
Well, I was drawing and painting all the time, and the art program was the typical contemporary art scene. It was the beginning of what are you doing drawing realistically? What are you doing drawing from life? Draw it like you feel it. And I was like, what? And so I already was like on a no, I'm not even good enough. Like I don't know how to draw. I must learn. And I caught that wave of that abstract expressionist generation after generation of teachers not learning how to draw. And so when I was in that, I was like, I got to get out of here because I don't want to be a writer anymore, which is another story because my writing teacher told me my work was fake New York. And I was like, but I'm from New York. She was like, sure you are. I was like, what? It was one of literally told me she was like an academic who just felt for whatever reason I wasn't from New York, even though I told her I was and she didn't believe me. So she kicked me out of the writing class. And I was like, okay, whatever. I just want to be a painter anyway. And so I left and I got into Rhode Island School of Design, a couple of other art schools, and then Art Center College of Design in Pasadena. And that was like the Harvard of art schools at that point. They had the highest level draftsmen in the country, Bern Hogarth, who did Dynamic Anatomy, Gary Meyer, one of the greatest perspective artists of all time, Steve Houston, just high level, Vern Wilson. And I said, I got to get into that school. I got into Art Center, and I just went to California, and I never looked back. And I didn't know anybody.
But it's like hitting the lottery to get into that school.
It was like hitting the lottery because I got a scholarship, and then when I got in the second day in head drawing class, I got up and I walked around the room, and I was sitting next to 2 prodigies. I was between 2 prodigies, and I looked at the first prodigy's work, and I said, wow, he's really good. And I looked at the second prodigy's work, and I said, wow, he's incredible. And I walked out into the hallway, and I started crying. So I was like, I can't be here. So once again, I was like it wasn't imposter syndrome. It was the reality of you're not drawing at a level enough where these guys, where my peers were. But then as I walked back in the room, I saw other people that were like a little better than me, kind of on my level, and then maybe like 1 or 2 guys who were like not as good as me. And so I said, okay, I'm gonna stay, and I just kept always just going. I know what I need to do. I need to do it. I know what I need to do.
I think about your work now, and in many of these pieces, there's storytelling. So you kind of go back. I mean, the fact that you're an English major writing about New York makes even more sense in some of the visual narratives that you've ended up painting that many of us know. When, post art school, what was your first art gig?
So I was I was doing storyboards because I drew really well. See, I started to draw really well. And I became obsessive compulsive with drawing, studying Rubens, studying Titian, studying Raphael, and then studying like Sargent, Zorn, and some of the Leyendecker, Norman Rockwell. Norman Rockwell, by the way, grew up 4 blocks away from us, from a different generation. Norman Rockwell's from like 101st Street in Riverside, which is trippy because he told the American story and I tell the American story through narratives. So it was just weird, kind of bizarre circumstance. But storyboarding. That was it. That was how I made my money. I did commercial storyboarding. I did entertainment. I wound up getting a job at BLT, which is a very competitive movie comp firm. And I was doing movie posters, drawing movie posters. And it was the fucking worst work I've ever had in my life. I was really, once again, I wasn't that great at it. I was good, I drew well, but I was so sloppy. So I would have charcoal, and I would do drawings of Brad Pitt and Leonardo, and with a ferry exploding or whatever. And they were it was like a mess everywhere. And there were so many people that were good doing it. Because you had to be a very good draftsman. This is pre-Photoshop. We weren't everything is laying into Photoshop. They might comp it out with thumbnails, but they're doing everything in Photoshop. And so for me, I was doing it traditionally. And I was working with very traditional level people. And I said, I can't do this. So I was back at my crib. I was living next to the kids from Kids in this skate deck house. It was a wild situation from extra large, the original extra large. So I got a gig working with Plan B and New Deal. So I was working with Andy Howe, had picked me up, and it was Barry McGee, me, Andy Howe, and I became one of the first artists to do paintings on slick bottom boards with that original 90s crew. It was 92. Yep. It was 92, 93, and I started doing that. And so I started being okay, I only made $500 for a slick bottom board and $250 for the pen and inks. So I started doing an amazing amount of skate decks for Plan B and New Deal, specifically New Deal with Paul Schmidt. And that was it. And that started, then I was okay, I could learn how to paint through these boards. Because there was no time to learn how to paint with movie comps. They were not fucking around. This was money, this was movies. And I was I'm going to leave that job, which was a decent paying job, and I'm going to risk it and just do this shit. And then I started doing the skate decks, and then that led me to doing a lot of record covers. I did the Quad City DJs. Remember that? Come on, Ride the Train. So I did a lot of the early stuff like that, and then I wound up doing the Slum Village video, Tainted. And then all of that commercial work led me to designing the entire look and feel for a $1 billion company, for a $1 billion game called NBA Street. I designed all those characters. I still have all the original paintings, and then all the backgrounds that you guys have never seen because it doesn't exist. Except in my archives. And then I did NFL Street. I designed the whole NFL. But these are $1 billion properties, and I was getting paid pennies. And I was creating the entire look and feel for these properties that would wind up becoming, $1 billion. And so that's what happened. It was Skate Decks gave me the opportunity to do the music videos, the commercials, the TV stuff, and then the video game stuff.
Well, what I'm hearing is that there's this through line in your career where for some reason or another it comes back to street, NBA Street, NFL Street,
right, yeah.
Skateboarding Street, all these things that are involve a street aesthetic, and you're able to deliver that. And then when you decide to maybe leave that all behind, you kind of go in a direction to capture this street aesthetic.
Well, so at that time, as I'm doing all this commercial stuff, I send my work off. Let me get it. I'm kidding. I send my work off to a poster distributor, and he says, I'll give you a shot. So he started, my first painting was Piano Man 1. I did it for Andy Howe's brand. And I did 3 paintings for Andy Howe at the trade show. That painting wound up becoming a poster. That poster wound up selling hundreds of thousands of prints. He was like, oh, this is cool. I got this, let me show the painting. This is my first this is really early. So that painting right there changed my life. Yeah, that was... I did that painting in one night. Just to be honest, stoned out of my mind, but I did it in one night. I did only one drawing for it. I just found that drawing the other day, which was amazing. And he was like, okay, let's do, he sounded like Woody Allen. He was like, I want to do a ton of jazz stuff. I want you to do jazz, everything jazz. So I started painting jazz imagery. And I love jazz. I went to the jazz clubs. My uncle was a jazz aficionado. I had peers in music and art who were really good, great, trumpet players and bass players. And I hung out with all these kids. And so I released the jazz trio. And these became, I didn't know this, but I didn't know how, I was in a vacuum because I'm just painting these images. And I love painting them. And I'm incorporating the rhythms of classical drawing and the rhythms of graffiti, streetcar graffiti, and the characters that I knew and grew up with. Because these are all archetypes. I'm not looking at any reference at this point in my career. I was very, draw from life, paint from life, or paint out of your imagination. Anyone that draws for reference is weak. I had a very systematic, hard knock way of looking at it. Like weakness, photo reference is weakness, and blah, blah, blah. And we're in an AI world now, so. I went so hard with these, and I had no idea how it was permeating the culture that when I finally got a website, I think overnight I had 1,500 emails. And I started seeing, oh my God, I love your work. I'm a huge fan. And I went to my distributor. I said, how many are we selling? He was like, not a lot. I was like, bullshit. So I started realizing, I went through Greenwich Village, and I went to all of the vendors. And all of the vendors were selling my shit. This is the 90s, in New York.
I remember seeing them there. This is the first one that I ever saw.
Okay, so that's 90, what does that say? 95 or 94?
94.
94. So I'm starting in 92. It starts to hit hard. And not realize, I still haven't, I don't realize he's cooking his books. I don't realize any of these, nefarious things are transpiring under his gallery. I don't realize any of this because I'm just stoked that people know my work. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm showing up at trade shows. So I start going hey, let me buy posters from you, because he's selling thousands of posters. At that point, it was head shops, it was skate shops, it was mostly mom and pop shops, rock and roll shops. They were doing all the poster framing, so they would sell you $20 for a poster, but they would upsell you $100 for the frame. So that's how they were selling my work. And my work was in Philly, Baltimore, everywhere. So I started buying from my distributor. His name was Bruce. And I would go take my work and sit and say, hey, I'm having a signing. This is like the old, the rock and roll shit. Nobody was doing this in the poster world. So I started just doing my own events, and I would have 300 people show up, 700 people show up. I went to Toronto, I had 2,000 people show up because my shit was all over Toronto, right? This is later. Nobody was doing that. And I was like, this motherfucker is making way more money on me than I think I know about. Because I was naive, I was green. And I didn't realize, that I was working with Dewey, Screw 'em, and Howe. And it was pretty gnarly. But I was doing these images, the basketball, my world. That's the Douglas Projects right there. That's the pool hall right there. That's the basketball game. I played a lot of ball, in Riverside Park and West Fourth, and these are the worlds. This is my child, and that's a child looking up into the world.
So you're painting your world.
I'm painting my world. The seedy world, much like Toulouse-Lautrec was painting the Moulin Rouge, or the brothels, or the circus. Folie Bergère, I'm painting the poker games. My grandfather had a lot of poker games, and as you could see, the painting in the background is a nod to Stag at Sharkey's, which was the George Bellows painting. One of my favorite painters from the Ashcan School. George Bellows was a monster of a painter.
Let's talk a little bit about your process. So let's fast forward a little bit.
Okay.
I'm guessing you don't work with Bruce anymore.
No, the Bruce part has an important aspect to it because that was the pivotal moment of my life. But let's wait till we get to that.
So what I wanted to ask you about was your process. We're seeing these images, these poster images, but from this book and just from knowing your work, you go through a pretty rigorous old school process in making and getting to a final. Can you tell us a little bit about that and just speak about your process?
Well, I start out in a way that I was taught, which is a very classical way. I start with design, which is basically value drawings, compositional drawings, and then I move to value keys, so I could see what's the darkest dark, what's the lightest light, you're a director. You're directing a movie. You're your own director, your own production designer, your own gaffer, lighting technician, actor, and you have to do everything yourself. And so I'm like, I need to know my values. What's my darkest dark? What's my lightest light? I need to know color keys. What time of day is it? What's the temperature? Is it daytime? Is it nighttime? Is it rim light? Is it cool light? Is it moonlight? Is it, warm light? So I have to figure that out, because if you go into a painting without that, which I do now because I'm deviating in different ways, but I really believe that if you go into a painting without that, then you're really going in with unprepared. And you need to be prepared. It's a battle. It's a complete war. Going through a real painting, a real vigorous painting, is a fucking war. Psychologically, emotionally, mentally, physically, and you have to have the right tools to get you through it.
So, do you still have those pieces from, the value keys and
Yes.
the comps for these paintings, all these paintings from all these years?
It's funny because some of the paintings I don't have, but I notice that I have the preliminary work, because I don't think that the culture today values that as much. So no one even, I have clients, right? We have clients all the time who are like, I want that painting. And Rob's like, oh my God, because he gets so freaked out about the value keys and the color keys, because he's an artist himself, so he understands. And he's like, you have to see his value key. And they'll show it to the buyer, and they're like, oh, that's cool. So yeah, let me get the painting. But really, the value key and the color key, that's where the magic is. That's the magic. Because that's the real shit. That's not, you can render your way out of a painting. You could trick your way out of anything, like kids do today with AI and Photoshop. It's a lot of bells and whistles and bullshit. And you could do that with a painting. If you're proficient enough, you can bullshit enough. But you can't do that with a drawing. You can't do that with a value key and a color key, and you shouldn't be able to, because it's not about that. It's about a means to an end. When you create that, you have a roadmap to get you to where you need to go. You've created your own blueprint. I mean, can you imagine building a massive skyscraper without a blueprint and all the preliminary work that goes into it? You don't have a solid foundation, it's going to crumble. So my belief is that you have to have the basics, the rudimentary foundation to build your castle.
Tell us a little bit about your subjects now. You've fallen into, or maybe not fallen into, you've leaned into the world of hip hop heavy. When and why did that start to happen?
Okay, so that'll bring me to the Bruce, to wrapping that up. So in 2004, I did 1981, which is the breakdance painting. No, sorry, 2001. Let's talk about the DJ. Sorry, the DJ. Has anyone ever heard of the DJ?
Yes.
Okay. By the way, the value key. This book is available. There's only a couple. I printed 40,000, and I only have probably 5 left over there, just in case you guys want to get it. And I'm signing mini prints after too. But this painting was because I negotiated my way to get to do this painting, because I was telling Bruce, I need to do something that's from my world, from my culture, the culture that I grew up around, the b-boys, the MCs, the DJs, the poppers. And he thought I was nuts. He's like, you can't do, no one's gonna hang that on the wall. So I said, okay, let me do another painting, which was Piano Man 2, the blue jacket. And if that sells X amount, will you publish a DJ painting that I do? And he said, sure. It sold like hotcakes. I did the DJ. He took it around Greenwich Village, all the people, and no one bought it. So he was right. He was like, it was so crazy to think about having a DJ on your wall. And to him, it was crazy, and to all the buyers, it was crazy. So he wound up selling it to a company in Canada called Imaginus, which were a bunch of hustler street kids. And they would drive their truck from college campus to college campus, and they would sell like that Scarface, Tony Montana one, you know, the Marilyn Monroe with the skirt coming up, you know, the Crash, you know what I mean? Like all of these classic paintings and photographs, and Monet's Water Lilies, you know, Mona Lisa, just everything, all of the classic images. And they wound up selling my DJ, and they were selling tens of thousands overnight. And so the people in the States were like, yo, I want to get what's hot. And so they started getting it, and they started selling tens of thousands. So the image that we couldn't sell one, I wound up to this day selling 14 million copies of that piece. It's actually, it's bizarrely one of the most sold prints and known prints of our era. And the amazing thing is, Bruce Telecky made a lot of money on that. You know what I mean? Yeah. And a lot of people did, you know? And so when the big mom and pops went away, and the big corporate retailers came in, the Targets, the Bed Bath & Beyond, the Z Gallery, the Prince Plus, they're very smart and calculated. So they went to the mom and pops and the rock and roll shops, and they said, what's hot? What sells? And they said, the DJ by Justin Bua, and the El Guitarista by Justin Bua, and Rising by Justin Bua. Justin Bua is hot. You got to buy. So that's why my work became so mainstream, was because it moved from the underground to the college, to the rock and roll shop, to the head shops, to basically the big box retailers. And I rode that wave for years. I did prints for so many years.
With Bruce?
No, I took the business over at that point, and I did it by myself.
It's very smart. So after the DJ, you lean further into hip hop.
Yes.
Who did you paint? What were the subjects? And then how have you kept it going?
So my second book after The Beat of Urban Art was The Legends of Hip Hop, because I've never really seen an homage to, you know, when you talk about hip hop, and we all know this, like we talk about like MC is like hip hop is LL Cool J and Jay-Z and Little Baby and Lil Wayne and Little Jeezy and Little Uzi and little somebody. But the reality is, no, hip hop is B-boys and DJs and beatboxers and this whole culture, right? The elements of the culture. And so I said, I have to do a book that I'm doing paintings and paying homage to Tupac and sure Jay-Z, but also Kool Herc and Sha Rock, you know, and these early pioneers, Kumo D, the guys that I grew up on, you know, and Wiggles. Like Wiggles was my hero forever. I love Mr. Wiggles, and as a popper. So all these characters started to get painted, and I was like, I want to do a book. And so HarperCollins, I said, I've got a great idea. And I sold almost 40,000, which now is hard to sell 40,000 because nobody reads books anymore. Nobody probably read my book the first time, they just looked at the pictures. But now to sell a book like that is so much, it's just a lot more difficult. And so I came out with Legends of Hip Hop, and it was, you know, we did really well because I don't think it had been done before. And I had an opportunity to paint all of these people who influenced me. You know, it wasn't just the East Coast heads like Big Daddy Kane and Rakim. It was also like Eazy-E and Ice Cube, because I went to LA and I went right into that culture. So I thought they were all had, you know, equal painting. You know, for me, they were both important.
So you're painting them, and what happens to the paintings? I mean, they make it in the book, they make it in the print. What happens to the originals? Are you also selling those paintings and getting them out there?
So I'm selling originals. You know, I'm selling to, you know, former presidents, to celebrities, to athletes, to, you know, entrepreneurs. But I'm also doing my poster stuff because it's important to me to have an audience that, you know, is just somebody that can afford a print. But yeah, I did sell a lot of them, and I also kept a lot of them, and I won't sell a lot of them because, you know, Some of them are historical to me and historically important. But for the right price, no, I'm kidding. But I am.
So, all these years later, we've talked about the 80s until today and this sort of journey into you owning your own business, getting out of being hustled and robbed for your prints and the money that you deserved, still owning your own paintings, your own originals, being able to self-publish books and prints. How do you stay motivated and how do you still get excited about it 40-something years later?
Well, Alan, I'm 34, so I don't know what you're talking about. That's weird. No, look, the art of business is just as difficult as the art of art. Like my friend who's a billionaire says, 50% of your business is managing your business. You know that more than anybody. It's all back office stuff. It's really boring in a lot of ways, and it's really uncreative. And so you have to make it creative. So like, for me, I'm at the level where like, I want to do this and I'll just figure out a way to get it done. And if I don't have to, sometimes I just might have to do it myself. It's like, you guys know who Walter Russell is? Who rewrote the periodic table, scientist, right? Philosopher, artist, illustrator, portrait artist, great sculptor. Like, sometimes you just gotta do shit yourself. He's 56 years old. He's a brilliant painter. The sculptor who's doing Thomas Edison's bust falls out. So Mrs. Edison says, I need someone to sculpt him for the Society of Arts, and he's got to do it fast. And Walter Russell says, I'll do it. Have you sculpted before? No, I've never had a ball of clay in my hand, ever. But I can do it because he believes he can. And he figures out how to do it, and it wins all these awards. His first sculpture ever was a masterpiece. If you could look up Walter Russell portrait bust of Thomas Edison, and it's massive. It's massive. But the same story is that he's a kid, and he needs $79 by the time he gets to the window to buy something, and he only has $5 in his pocket. But he has so much belief, because belief is just channeling the universal energy of truth, right? You're just meditating on the universal energy of truth and wisdom, and that's what he did. He just knew he could do it. He just knew he could get the bus done. He just knew that he would get $79 by the time he got to the front, and he did it. One guy's like, hey, can I pay you to hold my spot? To get your spot? He goes, yeah. So he started just doing all these crazy hustles. Next thing you know, he's doing it, because if you can't do it yourself in many ways, you're going to be beholden to doing something probably not the way it should be done. Unless you're working with somebody who's like-minded.
You got to level up.
You got to level up.
You got to level up and do it. So we're out of time, but we want to continue to have you, of course. We're supposed to stop the talk now at 8 o'clock and allow for some time for you guys to meet Justin, say what's up. If you've purchased a book, have them sign your book. If you purchased a print, have them sign your print, whatever it is. I think, we have, you brought some really special items down to share with the public. The last 10 copies of this book, which is outrageous, which I'm hoping they're gone already. And then a couple of very cool mini prints.
I think they're only like $20 mini prints. I printed them myself. Some of them are vintage from 7-something years ago.
Yeah, so you went into your archive to dig up some really cool stuff that we'll have today.
I have a limited amount of those, so I'll sign those too. I'll sign everything. So I'm going to be crazy.
So there's a couple of things around. Hang out, join us, have a glass of wine, meet each other, and enjoy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.